Hi guys and welcome to this film. I'm going to talk you through a topic which is very close to the heart of many English teachers. English teachers seem to be absolutely obsessed by this and I'll explain to you why. It is Valentine's Day today, so we're going to look at the thing that English teachers love, which is point, evidence, explain. I'll talk you through it, talk you through what it's for, we'll look at some examples and hopefully it'll be helpful for you in achieving this learning intention. Because I think the value really of point, evidence, explain is in helping us to structure. So we are learning to structure answers to kind of more complicated questions, to kind of how or why questions. And it shows us how to develop those answers into detail. Now, I would say before I start about PEE, it's not the be-all and end-all, it's not the only way to answer questions. And it's not the only way to think about your answers to questions, but it is a really useful strategy for putting together answers which quickly, under timed conditions, get to the point of what you want to say. So it's a helpful structure, particularly for exams, for controlled assessments, for that sort of thing, where you need to just get in, get your answer out and get out of there, but still be able to do that in quite a sophisticated and creative way, because there is creativity in PEE. I'll try and show you that. Okay, so let's go at the beginning. What is it then? PEE, some schools call it different things. We call it PEE or PEE plus. And that idea about the plus, trying to develop the explanation section as far as you can, stands for point, evidence, explain, and then more explanation. Develop your explanation further, really, because that's the bit that gets you the higher marks. And as I said, it's useful for answering kind of longer questions which require more analytical thinking. So how and why questions it's particularly useful for. I'll show you some examples in a minute, but before you even start thinking about English, it's worth thinking about applying PEE to different types of questions. It doesn't have to just be about stuff that you're doing in English. So, a why question. Why is The Simpsons such a popular show? Globally successful. How could we explain the success of that? Right, so we have a think about it. Point. One reason, one point to answer the question is because it has strong characters. Might not be the most important reason, but it is a reason. So you need so there's your point. It's got strong characters. That's what this paragraph's going to be about. That's what this PEE is going to be about. An example of a strong character, okay, Mo. Mo's an example of a strong character. I like Mo. Why is that then? Explain your answer. Explain why Mo is a strong character and why that's important. Well, he's funny, he's cynical, he makes everybody laugh. And then you develop your explanation, go a bit further with that. So why is that important? And you could talk for ages about characterisation in The Simpsons. You could talk about how he's funny, so it attracts people to watch the show. There's loads of different characters, so everybody's got lots of people that they can relate to. You could talk for ages about that. So that's a non-Englishy example, I suppose it's a bit media studies, but non-Englishy example of how you might use point, evidence, explain. In English, in your English course, these are more likely to be some of the questions that you might come across in opportunities to use PEE. Things like in your exam, how does the writer use language to persuade or whatever, or advise or inform or explain? That would be an opportunity to use PEE. Still in your exam, how does this text, or compare the way the text used presentation to engage the reader? There's where you could use PEE plus. In the literature side of things, how is Lenny presented in chapter 1 of Mice and Men? You'd be looking for opportunities to use PEE there, particularly if it's controlled assessment and you've only got an hour or 2 hours or whatever time you've got to do that question. How is the character of Macbeth developed in Act 1? So you can also use it for plays, you could also use it for poetry. Explore the ways that a selection of poets establish strong characters. All of these types of questions would be suitable for PEE. Now be careful, you don't always have to use PEE. If you're doing your own piece of creative writing, your own original writing, don't use PEE in that sense. PEE is for analysis of other texts, most importantly. Okay, that's the most useful way that we use it in English. Don't use it if you describe your ideal world. Don't start using PEE there because it gets very mechanical. But for questions where you've got to get in and out, it's useful. Right, so we're going to begin with the point. All right, now what makes a really strong point? What are we looking for when we're trying to get across our point, the P of the PEE? Well, I think these things are important. First of all, it's got to be clear and well expressed. It's the first line of your paragraph, often called your topic sentence as well. You've got to get onto the point in a clear and impressive way. Secondly, you need to focus on the requirements of the question. Your topic sentence should focus your answer on the question. So you always go back to what the question is. I'll show you some examples. And thirdly, to help you with that, I think it's a good idea to use the key words of the question in your point, so in your topic sentence. So let's have a look. If we choose, for example, how is Lenny presented in chapter 1 of Mice and Men? Well, here's a point that students made in the past. Starting their paragraph, Lenny is a very big and strong character. Now just have a think for a moment, is that any good? Is that doing the things that I've just shown you about what you have to do? Have a think about that, maybe look back and make a decision. Because for me, it's not. It's quite a weak topic sentence. It's a very obvious point, isn't it? It's not very sophisticated in any way. It's not very well expressed. He's very big and strong. It's using kind of quite basic language here. Crucially, it doesn't focus on the requirements of the question. Now look at your question again. How is Lenny presented in chapter 1? The question isn't, what's Lenny like? This question, when you get how is something presented, is asking you to look really, I think, at writers' methods. Or if you want to, do well, get the higher grades. What are the writer's methods? What has the writer done to get that character across to us, to get a sense of what that character's like? And if we just say Lenny is very big and strong, as if he's a real person who's really alive, well, he wouldn't be alive now, would he? Because he's with the events at the end of the book. But, who was alive, you're not showing a great deal of sophistication. And also, there's no sense of the keywords of the question. If we say the keywords of the question are, how is he presented? Then that's not really going to do the job. So what about this? Lenny is described as a huge man in chapter 1. Is that any better? Have a think about that for a moment. Well, no, I don't think it is really. Because, first of all, it uses a quotation. That's your evidence. Hang on to that. Don't use that in your first line. And again, it's just a bit simple, a bit straightforward. It's not using the keywords of the question. It's not focused on what the question requires you to do. So what would you do? See, this is the problem, isn't it? Sometimes students get to this stage, think, right, I'm all ready, do my point, evidence, explain, but they don't know what their points are. You've got to be really clear, and this is why you have to plan. This is why you have to go through that process of filling in the little box and making sure you know what's going in each paragraph. Some of the things that you might look at, good points which are focused on the requirements of the question, are you might look at the way Lenny's described physically. What he looks like, how he walks, that sort of thing. You might look at comparisons that are made between Lenny and George. You might look at his speech or the dialogue between Lenny and George. What does he say? How does he say it? You might look at his actions, what the character actually does in the opening chapter. And then you might look at things about Steinbeck's particular writing style and writing methods. So, for example, there's lots of comparison between Lenny and animals in the first chapter and throughout the novel. So that might be something that you could write about. Or you might write about foreshadowing devices that Steinbeck employs. So things like Lenny playing with a dead mouse kind of foreshadows events that are to come later in the novel. Now, all these things here are appropriate things to write about in a topic sentence or make as your point for a point, evidence, explain paragraph for this answer. Okay, so let's have a look at what that might look like. So this is a bit better, and I like this because it's clear. It's straight onto the point. One way that Lenny is presented in chapter 1 is through the use of physical description. Why is that good? Because it's clear. You've been asked how is he presented. You're saying one way he's presented is this. Okay, it's not vague, it's not saying, John Steinbeck wrote this book in, it's straight on to the question. You've got the key words of the question, one way that Lenny is presented. Presentation is in the title, presentation is in the answer. So you're answering the question. And then you're making a clear point. The point is through the use of physical description, full stop. Okay, just be careful, you don't run your point into your evidence. Put a full stop there. Nice, straightforward, clear. You can get an A star with that as your opening sentence. It doesn't need to be, because your sophistication comes later. doesn't need to be massively complicated. However, we did say that being well expressed is important. So you can reflect on how you phrase your points. What about this? One striking feature of Lenny's presentation in chapter 1 is Steinbeck's use of physical description. Same point, just sounds a bit better. Why is that? Because you've got that nice phrase, one striking feature. You're bringing attention to the author. You see how really, in this essay, and in essays like this, you're writing about what the writer's done in your points, not what the character's like necessarily. The character's not real. As literature and English language students, you're expected to be able to write about what the writer has done to achieve their effects. Okay, you're not writing like a profile of this random fictional guy. You're writing about John Steinbeck more than anything else. What about this then? Steinbeck employs subtle physical description to present Lenny in the opening chapter. Again, pretty good. That's a well-expressed point, isn't it? Why? Because you've said Steinbeck employs. Isn't it just a nice kind of verb choice, subtle physical description? Try not to say, like to write a book review, he's really cleverly does this. Lots of students kind of tend to do that, and it just doesn't sound very kind of conventional or professional. You know, you want to have gushing praise about this author. That won't get you any more marks to show how much you love John Steinbeck. He's not going to mark your essay. But, yeah, subtle physical description sounds quite nice. So, when you're writing your point evidence explains, you've got to focus on getting a decent point first of all. All right? There's no point writing a thing if you haven't got sort of 3 or 4 decent quality points to make. Some of the phrases that might be useful for you then, try and guide your reader through your essay. Things like one way the writer presents whatever, Macbeth or character or theme is by, and then finish that off. Is by using imagery, is by control. If it's poetry, you might write about is by controlling the pace of the poem or controlling the form of the poem. Something like that. Next paragraph, secondly, the writer employs something to shape the reader's response. I love that phrase, to shape the reader's response to the character, to make us respond in a particular way. Use that one, it's a good one. Also, the writer, blah, blah, blah. Finally, something else is used to present the character. Now, if you're going to use that as a frame, they're the sorts of phrases that would guide you through. Now, obviously, one way is followed by an entire paragraph. It's not just finish these sentences. That's only to make your points. Okay, so there we are. That's about all I've got to say on points, other than to remind you to make them clear and well expressed, to focus on the requirements of the question, and to help you do that, use the key words of the question in your answer. Okay, I'm going to have a rest and then I'm going to do the evidence film. Still haven't got the hang of ending these films, but I'll get on with it now.